Robert Greene. How are you today?
I'm fine, Pani. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
Such a pleasure. Such a big honor to have you on. I've been waiting almost a year for this date and very ready to dive into some of these topics with you. But first and foremost, how are you? How are you doing with your new book coming out
Well, it's not really coming out. It's coming
anytime soon?
not very soon, I'm afraid. I'm about a fourth of the way through the writing, and it's just going very slow, maybe a third. A lot of it is because I can't type right now. So I have to go through this very arduous process of writing that's very unnatural for me, where I handwrite everything. I edit with my handwriting, and then finally I have to dictate it into my computer. So
Why can't you type something?
I had a stroke about 3 years ago, nearly fatal stroke, and
Wow.
it left the left side of my body essentially paralyzed. I mean, it's not paralyzed now. I can use it, but my left arm and leg are very, very weak. So I
Oh,
can only
wow.
type with one hand.
Ooh, well, glad you're alive, first and foremost.
Well, you're glad. I am too.
There are like all these assistants with typing. Like I used to work for this lady. She had problems with her hands, and I used to like when I was really young, I got hired by her, so I would just like type for her. But now there are all these like technological tools. Like I'm sure you use some of them now to type.
They have dictation. Maybe I could hire you to do my typing for me. You're too important now for that job, but I thought of that, of hiring someone, but I have a dictation software that I use. It's not very good, but it's okay.
Gets the job done.
Yeah.
You also come out with these books so fast, especially for the amount of intensive research that goes into them.
The Laws of Human Nature took me 5 years to write, 4 or 5
Right.
years, and I mean, originally the 48 Laws of Power was my first book. I was much younger then, had more energy, and that only took 2 years to write. And ever since then, the books have taken longer and longer and longer and longer to write. As I get older, as my energies decrease, as my ideas become more complicated. So it's
Yeah.
not as quick as you might think, but for the Laws of Human Nature, I read an incredible amount of books for the research, hundreds of books.
Wow.
So it was very difficult to bring that all together into what turned into a sort of a long book. So
Yeah.
that took longer for a reason. I was hoping this book wouldn't take as long, the Law of the Sublime, but it's not in my hands. I'm going as fast as I can.
Well, take your time. We have plenty of material to cover before
Sure.
the next one
Okay.
comes out.
Okay.
And so I would love to hear a quick rundown of your creative process when you're writing your books, because it's a very specific way of that. And I've noticed from Power, you've changed your style a little bit. You used to have like all those like, written notes and stuff on the sides, and then they kind of like went away.
Well, I had it in Seduction and in the War book. And I
Oh,
actually wanted to have it for my last two books. But because I was so late in delivering it to the publisher, they basically said, we don't have time to put it in there. So I was sort of disappointed. I had a lot of material to put on the sides. My next book, I would like to do the thing on the sides because I think it adds something to the books.
yeah.
But my creative process is very weird and unusual. I don't know if it's something that other people could exactly copy. But basically, I start with an idea for a book, like let's say Human
Hmm.
Nature. And I'm not quite sure exactly what the book is going to. I have a general idea of the subject. What is it about human nature that hasn't changed for thousands of years? What are these kind of concrete laws that are embedded in how our brains are wired? A general idea. And then I read lots and lots and lots and lots of books on the subject, books on psychology, books on biology, books on evolution, history books, biographies. And slowly I start to get ideas. And I think if you're asking about my creative process in general, not day to day, I take all of my research and I put it on note cards. I
Mm.
could show you my system here, hundreds, thousands of note cards for one book. And as I do the note cards, let's say maybe 300 or 400 of them in the beginning, and they have different colors. They're all color coded, and they have like I put titles on the top. It's all handwritten,
Mm-hmm.
and excuse me, I have like 300 or 400 of them. Then I decide, all right, maybe I start looking through them, and I start seeing patterns. I
Mm-hmm.
start seeing chapters that form, and then
Right.
I create categories for chapters. And then finally, eventually, I come up with 18 chapters, which was the laws of human nature. And so I have my cards. And at some point, maybe a year and a half into the process, I decide to start to write. And I
Mm-hmm.
take the cards and the chapters, say chapter one, which is about irrationality. I maybe have 60, 70 cards for that. I start going through it and I start creating the chapter out of the cards. But the system in general is the following, which is something very important, is a very important lesson for people in general.
Right.
If you do something too structured and too tight in any kind of creative venture, you lose all the joy, you lose all the life, and it becomes
Right.
very mechanical. But if you just go at it with no idea in mind, just being open and creative and free, with no research, with no system, with no structure, your brain can't handle all of the material. And what will come out is something very kind of mediocre or even
Mm-hmm.
worse than that. So you need to have a combination of the two. Your work has to have a structure and organization. And I love structure and form and organizing. I find it actually kind
Yeah.
of fun. And you also need freedom to be spontaneous, to have some fun with your book or whatever you're making, and to feel like you're discovering things as you go. So it's kind of like a dance between those two things, my process. And right now, I'm finishing a chapter for my new book on childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a very difficult chapter, and I'm near the end of it. I'll probably finish in a few days, but when I get near the end, it gets really tight and intense in my brain. I don't sleep very well, and I get kind of cranky. So I'm sort
Oh.
of in that phase right now. That's a general idea of my creative process.
So would you say the endings of the books are usually the most difficult part for you?
Well, what happened was with the human nature and other books, by the time I reach the end, I'm so tired and so exhausted. Sometimes I feel like I can't make it any further. I'm going to
Oh,
die.
oh my
And
God.
literally, and literally after I finished the laws of human nature, 3 months later is when I had my stroke. I had kind of driven myself
Oof.
too hard. So what happens near the end is you get tired and you slow down, and it just becomes a bit of a grind. And then you reach the end, and whoa, do you feel fantastic when you reach the end? It's a
I
great
can't wait.
feeling.
I'm still like almost halfway. You know,
Uh-huh.
it's the kind of book you can't, like, there are a lot of books I read and I just kind of like, a lot of parts like skim through them, or, like, you can't do that with your books. It's like you need to understand, and like sometimes double take, sometimes like I go back, sometimes I like highlight them and then I have to like take a moment and think about it. Sometimes I need to close the book and just like go and, process what I read. A lot of the parts that I read make me feel that way. So, and for it to be a big book like that, like that's going to take me a long time. So, but I'm excited to get to that ending to see what
Okay.
exactly what
Okay.
is the book that gave you a stroke? Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, the last chapter is about death. It's about dealing with your mortality, which is very ironic, you know. And so,
Yeah.
like
Wow.
3 months after I wrote it, I'm literally facing it. So that's what fate had in store for me, you know.
Like taste it yourself.
Exactly. Exactly.
And as a creative, where do you put a line between being original and just giving people what you think they want to see, hear, or read? Or do you do that, or is it just
Well, I think in life, as in anything, you want to have both. I mean,
right?
I like to be original in the sense of you can look at my books and you could hate them or you could love them, but you can say there's nothing else out there like them. right? So when I created the
Original.
48 Laws of Power with the things on the side, with the images, with the stories, I created a unique form for a book. There's
Yeah,
nothing else out there like that, right? So in
right.
that sense, I think it's important to be original because in this world today, there are so many unoriginal people. There are so many people who are copying others, right? And everything is down to a formula. We see that in Hollywood. We see that now with books. Oh, what was the big success last year? Oh, I'm going to imitate that, or I'm going to imitate what other people are doing. And it can get you some power and get you some money, some success, but not real success comes from being unique, original, standing out among all the other people who are writing books or creating movies or podcasts. And people say, there's no one else like Pani out there. There's no one else out there like Robert Greene. On
Right.
the other hand, you can't be so original and so creative and so new that people scratch their heads and go, this doesn't make any sense. I don't like it. It's too weird. So you have to
Right.
be able to relate to people. So whenever I'm writing, I'm continually thinking about the reader. And I'm thinking, are they going to understand what I'm writing? Is it clear enough? Is it
Right.
relevant to their lives? Is this, if you're sitting in an office or you've got this particular kind of day-to-day grind, is this story about Napoleon Bonaparte really going to hit you? Are you going to find it relevant? I have to work
Yeah.
on it and work on it and work on it until I feel it has importance for your everyday life and it strikes you as something new. So it's kind of like I said before, it's kind of a dance between those two things and keeping them together at some point.
Say your most famous book, which is The 48 Laws of Power, is banned from prisons in the States. Is that correct?
As far as I know, it's banned from most prisons. I don't know if I can say it's banned from every single one. I know certain states like Utah and Pennsylvania have like laws in place where you cannot get the book in prison. I don't know if it covers every single state, but basically, it is not a book that is welcomed in the prison system. We can say that at
For
least.
sure. Why do you think that is?
Well, I've had contact with some people who've been in the prison system. I was recently on a podcast from an English gentleman who had been in American prison for many years. And basically, he discovered the 48 Laws of Power while he was in prison, a very educated, articulate young man. And, I understand through the feedback I've gotten from people in prison, I mean, something we can all understand. It is perhaps the most brutal atmosphere that one could possibly imagine for anybody to be in. It's power in the most naked, raw, and brutal form imaginable, right? And it's not only the fellow prisoners who can be so hard and difficult and
Right.
manipulative, they're playing all kinds of mind games, but the wardens, the guards, there's all these levels of things going on that are very confusing.
Right.
And for people who enter the system for the first time, it's like, whoa, I can't handle this. It's too much. They get very depressed. They feel completely helpless. And then they discover the 48 Laws of Power and they go, well, this can help me deal with this incredibly harsh system. I have to learn how to control my emotions. I have to learn how to see through the various games people are playing. I have to get control of the situation. And it has helped them. And in the prison system, they don't like prisoners being empowered. They don't want prisoners who are kind of aware of all of the manipulations that are going on and who can develop this kind of self-control. So they don't want them reading this book in prison, and it's part of a new, very frightening system going on in the American prison system.
Right.
Also in the country at large, where
Yeah.
books are being banned. But like in the state of Pennsylvania, they don't have a library anymore. And in prisons, it used to be really the library was their one salvation, where you could just kind of feed your mind and not kind of
Right.
rot. They have like their version of a Kindle, right, in the
Hmm.
system, and you can only get certain books that they approve of. And so a lot
Right.
of books that are kind of controversial or a little bit dark or a
They
little
don't
bit
want you to
heavy,
read those.
they're not even available.
Mm.
So
Wow.
I have a lot of empathy for people in prison. I often imagine, what if somehow I ever ended up in that system? I remember when I was younger, how would I manage? How would I cope? So
You'd
I
be the
understand.
top dog because you already know all the rules.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But I'm not big and buff enough. I don't have an intimidating presence. Maybe I could have developed that. I could have shaved my head, had lots of tattoos and stuff.
No, see, that's the thing because you would make the big dogs be your little bitch and they will work for you because you have the mental capacity to do that. That's better than having big muscles.
That's true. That's true. I like the way you phrase that. Well, I'll try it out. Maybe I'll commit some crime and I'll see what happens. We'll do it a
Then the
little
book you
experiment.
if you wrote a book after that, that would be pretty sick.
Well, I
The
love
book.
I love kind of crime movies, and I'm fascinated with movies that detail like the robbery of a bank and all the
Yeah,
strategy going in. And
right?
I often tell my girlfriend, I want to think about maybe let's rob a bank. I think
Yeah.
I could come up with the best plan. She goes, no, 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 no. You're going to end up in prison. You're not going to be able to eat the food. It's going to be horrible. I go, no, I'm not. No one's going to catch me. I'm going to figure it out. So a part of me is attracted to committing some kind of pulling off a crime like that as a kind of a mental game and seeing if I could get away with it. And if I don't, I end up in prison and then I write a best-selling book about my experiences. That's a great idea, Pani. Thank you.
I'm a supporter. I
Okay.
think that's a great idea.
Okay.
I would worry about your health though. I wouldn't want you to, you know.
The food isn't very good in prisons, and I kind of like good food, so there are
Yeah,
drawbacks.
I feel you. I feel you. I always thought if I ever go to prison, I'm gonna learn Spanish and I'm gonna get really jacked. So I've paid a lot of thought to like if I ever went to prison, I wouldn't be like, I wouldn't be too worried. Is that bad to say? I feel like I'd be fine.
Well, you probably would. You bring the 48 laws of power with you.
Yeah,
You'll
right?
be okay. Yeah, I don't know what women's prisons are like because I don't know if they're banned in women's prisons or not. So that would be a whole different game. Maybe you should try it
Yeah.
out and then we could write a book together.
Let's both try it out.
Uh, okay.
So, okay, let me ask you, why do you think people play all these political games? People always like talk about being simple and honest and being like such an open book. And, they always complain about all these other people being two-faced and being untrustworthy. But really, when it comes down to it, like everybody has that game, everybody has that play where like they say one thing, they do another thing. Maybe it's not intentional, it's not to be a bad person. But why do you think it is that instead of people just being super honest and super open book and simple, which seems to be an attractive idea because people portray themselves to be that way. But then it's almost never the case. People tend to play these political games. Why do you think that is?
Well, we have particular values and they've gotten, more extreme as in the 21st century where we kind of value honesty and being a good person, being socially positive, being progressive, being socially aware, the whole social justice warrior thing and virtue signaling and all that. It's become more and more extreme. Nobody to say in a conversation, I want power. I'm very ambitious. I want to have some power over my career, over the people I work for. That sounds ugly, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't sound nice, right? And we all want to be approved by others. We want to fit in. We want other people to like us. That's a primary human motivation, to fit in and to people think that we're good and they like us, right? So we are motivated to kind of fit into the group and to assume the values and to portray ourselves as being these virtuous, saintly figures that in reality we never, ever are, right? So I like to look at children. In the Laws of Human Nature, I have a chapter on the shadow, the dark side of human nature. And I maintain
Mm.
everybody, including you, has a shadow, right? That dark side that you don't want people to see. You try and conceal it. It contains your kind of aggressive impulses. It contains some things that are maybe a bit ugly, a bit selfish, things like envy, things like aggressive desires and impulses. right?
Right.
You're hiding them desperately because they're not good. And when you were
Yeah.
a child, you had all of that dark energy. It was very natural to you because that's part of being a human being. We are animals. We are humans, but we are also animals, and we have this kind of animal energy to us. And a child is a complete person with, at some moments they can be very sweet and nice, and the next moment they can be very aggressive and very angry and act out in ways that are not very polite. And then
Yeah.
as we get older, we learn that to fit in, to be liked in school, to be liked in our work, we have to kind of control that. We have to push that down. We have to rather appear only the sweet, angelic, nice side of us must appear in these social arenas, right? So we repress all of that dark energy. But it doesn't go away. It's still there. It's still inside of us. And it comes out in weird ways. It leaks out later in life. It comes out in ways that you were talking about where people play manipulative games that they're not even aware of, right? They become very passive aggressive. And if you looked at it, and I analyzed this in all of my books, in your day-to-day encounters, you're not aware of it, but you're continually butting up against this manipulative, passive aggressive side of people. It's in
Right.
everything they do because humans have an intense desire to feel, a natural desire to want power, to want a degree of control over their lives. And if they can't get it directly in acting out and doing what they want, they're going to be indirect. They're going to play these games, right? And so we don't like to think about that part of ourselves. We want to think that we're all good and kind and sweet and wonderful, right? So that part of it is very hidden. You have to learn how to detect these kind of patterns in people's behavior. But what I
Right.
wanted to do in my books is remove all the guilt and the shame about this. Okay?
Hmm.
You are a human being. You are a complete person. You have these desires for power. You feel envy sometimes. I feel envy. Everybody feels envy. You have aggressive impulses, right? You can be irrational, etc. So stop trying to deny it and stop trying to pretend that you're Mahatma Gandhi and just acknowledge the fact that you have this in you, right? And be a complete person and find a way to bring that kind of darker energy into play without hurting people, right?
Hmm.
So my book, starting from the 48 Laws of Power, is I'm tired of people's hypocrisy. I'm tired of people pretending to be something that they're not. And I want to show you that there's nothing wrong with having these natural tendencies. They're in all of us.
Very true. But then you also talk a lot about don't be fooled but by what people show you immediately when you meet them. This persona, this mask that we all have over the years, many, many times have practiced to show as something that we figured is likable, right? So now with this dark side, with this shadow self, it's like don't suppress your shadow self so much that this persona is now your full, what people see. Bring that shadow a little into play and, make it something that's a little more balanced and still authentic.
Yeah, that's definitely what you want to do. So, for instance, you feel envy, right? And
Hmm.
envy means that there's somebody out there that has something that you wish you had, but you don't have. And on
Hmm.
social media, on Instagram or whatever, you're continually feeling it because you're seeing people's photographs of them having these perfect bodies and you don't have a perfect body. You see them having photographs of vacationing in Tahiti and all these exotic locations, and you're stuck in some Midwestern town where the weather is awful, right? You see them having some great, fantastic job going here and there, and you're stuck in this bad job or whatever. You're continually comparing yourself and feeling envy, okay? So instead of denying it, admit it to yourself and find a way to turn that envy into something productive, into something healthy, and to something that will work for you. So, for instance, if you're feeling envy towards people, think that maybe what you should do instead of like saying bitchy things about them or trying to hurt them in some way, maybe you should feel compelled to try and be as good as they are. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you can, work out and be healthy as they are, or you can get a better job, or you can do something that will improve yourself. So use your envy as a spur to become more competitive and to kind of try and emulate them and improve your life.
So draw inspiration from it.
Yeah. And also realize that your envy, which you feel and admit, is actually probably exaggerated. So that person who looks so healthy and has a perfect body is probably not very happy, right?
Yeah.
Or I have an example in Laws of Human Nature of Aristotle Onassis, who in the 60s, he was this great Greek shipping magnate who was the wealthiest man in the world.
Mm-hmm.
He was the equivalent of a multi-billionaire back then. And he was married to Jacqueline Onassis, the Jacqueline Kennedy, the former wife of
Mm-hmm.
John F. Kennedy. Who could have a more perfect life? Money, beautiful women, yachts. He was the most unhappy, miserable person on the planet, right? He was continually dissatisfied and
What was wrong
unhappy.
with them?
Well, sometimes money doesn't bring you happiness. It just brings you problems. It just brings you insecurity. It just makes you wish that you could get everybody to do your bidding and you can't, right?
Yeah.
So the people you envy are probably not as happy as you think. So go through this
Very true.
process where you can kind of use your envy and make yourself not give in to these kind of negative impulses without being dishonest. I could go
Yeah.
through aggression and how to take your natural aggressive energy and channel it into something productive, like being the best podcaster on the planet. Or if there's some cause you believe in very vehemently, like global warming, whatever, take all that anger and aggressive energy and try and
Yeah.
do it for some important cause. But don't deny it. Don't pretend that you're a saint or something. Just acknowledge that you have these envious feelings or that you have these aggressive impulses and find a way to make them work for you.
Absolutely. And something that like we tend to do as humans, I always notice this, is when we see something that we like in someone, we always tend to make up an opposite scenario in our mind that we have. For example, if we see a really nice car, right? We don't just say, oh, my car is only a little bit less than this car, and hopefully I will one day have this car. No, no, no. We just naturally tend to think, look at this nice car. Oh, now I have to go get in my piece of junk of a car. Even if your car is not a piece of junk, but we just always do that opposite, like an extreme opposite. Or like, look how beautiful and perfect her body is. Oh, I'm just like a fat piece of, whatever. It's like, no, you're probably not a big fat piece of whatever, but it's like, to make that, we always do that extreme comparison. We never do like a halfway, oh, like, I'm just a little bit uglier, or I'm just a little bit more overweight than that. It's always like, no, I'm this and she is that. It's like we separate ourselves so much just to make that like contrasted, you know what I'm talking about? And I don't know
It's
why we do that. And I do that myself too.
it's almost like we want to make ourselves miserable. But let's
Yeah,
say
we want to hurt ourselves.
you see that person, they've got a Maserati and you have a Toyota or whatever, and you kind of feel like, oh, why couldn't I had a car like that? Well, just understand that a car like that is absolutely, go through a process, be rational. Well, in Los Angeles, if that's where you live, that Maserati is pretty useless because you're always stuck in traffic. You're not going to be going anywhere. You're not going to be going sexily going through these mountain passes. You're going to be stuck in traffic like everybody else. You're going to
Well,
be you're going to be
that's just
definitely
not true. Because you're going to go pick up a girl with that car and she's going to be a lot more impressed
well,
with
okay.
you
You
than if you
don't
were to go
you
pick her
don't
up in a
want to be with a
Toyota.
girl. You don't want to be with a girl with such shallow values. If she is only impressed by the kind of car that you have, that's not someone that should be interesting you, right? Look, what I'm trying to say is here, Pani, is why make yourself miserable? Why go through a thought process that's only going to bring you down? Try and
Yeah,
find a thought process that is going to
that
help
helps
you.
you.
So you can go one of two ways. You can go, damn it, I'm going to get a Maserati myself. Okay, fine. Work hard, make more money, And if that's something very important to you, you have to make a lot of money to be able to pay $200,000 for that damn car, then go for it, okay? Or the better thing to do is to go, it's actually fine to have a Toyota because I don't have to pay as much insurance. I don't have to worry about it getting in a crash. If it's in a crash, I'll just get it fixed. Whereas a Maserati, you're always afraid of somebody hitting
Yeah,
you know?
always worried.
So it's okay to have what you have, right? To find like it's to find, what's good about your life. Or that person who's got seemingly the perfect body, they're probably not so happy inside because that's the only thing that seems to matter to them is how they look,
Right.
right? But spiritually or consciously, they're not very developed. Maybe they are, but you can go through this
Yeah.
process and go, I have a chapter in the 48 Laws of Power about this very phenomenon called disdain things you cannot have, the sort of sour grapes idea. So if people have better things than you, just imagine that they're not so happy, that they're not so great, and that your life is okay. Right?
It's like, yeah, we tend to put people on pedestals, right? So it's like, knock them off that pedestal and then see how you feel about it, right? Because then it's like, okay, if you see someone on a pedestal, you could either tell a story to yourself, which then gives you a sense of meaning that's powerful enough so that then you put yourself on a high level as a pedestal as them. So either like tell a story to yourself that brings you just as high as they are, or knock them off the pedestal that they're on.
That's very, very well put, because these are stories that you're telling yourself.
Right.
Stories you tell yourself are either going to be making you miserable, which is what a lot of us do during our day-to-day lives, or there are stories that are going to make you feel better about yourself, or at least feel that things are going in the right direction. So it's really how you look at the world. I have a chapter in the Laws of Human Nature about your attitude, about how you look at the world. There are many things you can't control in life. You maybe can't control that you can't afford a Maserati, or that you didn't go to Yale or Harvard and you can't get that 6-figure, 7-figure job, okay? But there are other ways of looking at the world where you can say, there are good things. I see things where I'm motivated to improve myself, where I'm not going to only look at the negative, right? I'm going to see how I can change how I view the world. And that's the one thing you have power over. You may not be able to go to Yale or Harvard, but you can turn your attitude into something that's incredibly more powerful than an MBA at Harvard, where you see, what is important, and you see, how you can get ahead in life, and you have a plan and a process for getting ahead. So you can change your attitude from being negative and down and always seeing the dark side of things to one in which you see that you can improve yourself, that you have power over things, that you can enjoy your life, that you can see pleasure in small things. So your attitude gives you kind of power.
Absolutely. And I don't know if have you read Men's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
Yeah, it's a great book.
It's a great book. It's one of the books that I always recommend people to read. His main thing is find purpose and meaning in your life, right? And this is something that you can do, I think, when you're in your 20s, hopefully, so that you can just kind of align yourself with that purpose for the rest of your life, even though your purpose is ever changing and shifting and evolving with you. But to find out what the meaning of your life is. If you seek meaning in having those material things and having that Maserati, and you think that that's going to bring you the credibility and attention that you need, that's fine. But then you have to take the steps to go and get that. Or maybe you figure out to yourself that finding the meaning in your life is in spirituality, or in helping others, or in just doing something else. Then when you get those feelings of envy and jealousy when someone has a Maserati, then you bring yourself back to what's more important to you, right? And then you just don't focus on that so much.
Right. I couldn't have put it better. So basically in life, you're kind of thrown after college or school or whatever, you're kind of thrown into the work world, and nobody kind of gives you any direction, any guidance, right? In the past, you kind of had your career path sort of set out for you in certain ways. Now it's just all open and you can get kind of lost. A lot of young people in their early 20s are very much lost. Where do I go? What's the direction of my life? I could choose 800 different things because on the internet, I can see everything. I could be a doctor, I could be a rock singer, I could be a poet, I could be an actress, whatever. I don't know. I feel lost. There's too much choice, right? You have no direction and you have no sense of purpose. And I
Read
kind of,
Mastery.
yeah, well, that's what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
it's like you're on a boat and you have no compass and you don't know where is north or south or east or west. And you're kind of drifting in this vast ocean. And eventually you hit a rock or something because you have no idea where you're going, right? So that sense of meaning, that sense of purpose that you're talking about is perhaps the most important step of all in life, I think. And it's the
Yeah.
first chapter in Mastery, because without it, your life is going to be miserable. I'm sorry to say it will be miserable. It doesn't mean you have to have this complete, perfect focus.
Right.
When you're 22, I'm going to do this, that, or the other, because then there's no fun. Then you have no discovery. But you have to have a general sense of what gives you pleasure in life, of what you were meant to create, of what is different about you, how your body is wired, how your brain is wired. I was meant to be a writer. I was meant to work with people and do something social. I was meant to be a scientist. Music is my field. Something, a general sense of what gives you meaning and purpose and direction in life. And then, as you so eloquently put, once you have that meaning or direction in life, then it gives you the ability to cut out all the bullshit, to give yourself
Right.
focus. So if your purpose in life is to create some new business venture, some new tech company, and that's, you know, what you're good at, and then you see somebody who's doing something like they have that perfect car or whatever, and you go and you can take a step back and you go, well, that's not really who I am. That's not really what matters to me. What matters to me is building something, creating something. And then if I get a great car, that's fantastic. But it's not like the most important thing to me. In fact, it's kind of stupid to waste $200,000 on just this thing that's just polluting the environment. It gives you a sense of values and a way to judge what really matters to you, right?
Yeah.
So in Mastery, I say that everybody has such a purpose, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and you can find it. And I give you a way to find it. The keys to it were in your childhood, and the keys to it are knowing yourself better, knowing who you are, knowing what makes you happy, what you hate, what you love,
Yeah.
etc. But without that, you're completely lost in life.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Like knowing what you are here to do and what it is you're after really definitely gives you that compass that always brings you back. It's like, yeah, you might look at other things, you might appreciate how cool they are, but then you just kind of like you look and then you're like, okay, and then you go back to what you know you're meant to follow. Um, I did a book review on Mastery when I read it a few months ago, and I always say like, okay, I think this is the category of people that I think would be best to read this book, and I always thought Mastery would be so perfect for like people that are in college or they're like young adults or maybe like in their 20s, just because of that those chapters where it talks about finding what you're good at, figuring out what your meaning is, figuring out what your purpose is, and like mentorship and all of these things that you talked about in Mastery. I thought it would be so perfect for people that are in their like late teens or 20s, or maybe even 30s if you still haven't figured those things out.
Well, it's very, very important that in your 20s you do kind of figure it out. I mean, as I've said in the very beginning, it's kind of a balance between things. That's sort of the message I'm applying here. So you want to have a degree of direction in life, but you don't
Right.
want it too tight and too narrow where you don't have any fun, you don't have any
Yeah.
adventure, you don't explore. So when you're in your 20s, you want to explore, you want to have fun, you want to be exploring and having interesting experiences,
Yeah.
right? So if you're 22 and you decide, my parents told me I have to go to law school and I have to be making this money, and then you do that and you start making good money when you're 26 or 27, by the time you're 30, you're going to feel really bored and restless. You didn't have fun. You didn't have a youth. You didn't try
Yeah.
things out. So maybe if your path is to become a lawyer, which I don't necessarily think is the best path in life, although it could be for you,
Yeah.
maybe don't like rush into working for some high-powered law firm when you're 25 making all this money. Maybe try different lower levels of law that are kind of a little different, a little more creative, a little more interesting. Or maybe get your degree and then travel to Europe and see some interesting things, or travel to Asia and then come back. Anyway, widen your experiences within that framework of knowing what you want, right?
Yeah.
So I don't mean to hold myself up as a model, but when I was young, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And so in my 20s, I tried everything. I tried journalism. I lived in Europe for several years. I wandered around with a backpack trying to write novels. I came back to Los Angeles. I tried to work in Hollywood. That didn't
Yeah.
work. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of experience. So by the time that I wrote the 48 Laws of Power, I had all of these things to
Yeah.
draw upon. I had seen a lot of really ugly power games in all the different jobs I had. But I had adventures and I explored. So you want to have both. If you just have fun, if you're just like in your van exploring the United States and talking about posting on Instagram, it's kind of empty because you have no direction in life. And then you're
Right.
kind of left when you're 28. You don't have any skills. You have nothing to build upon. You don't really know where you're going. That's a really ugly feeling. So it's good to have a sense of direction, but to not be so tight about it that you can only follow this one path.
I agree. And another thing you talk about in Mastery that I really liked is, and this is something that Adam Scott talks about also. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he talks about talent stack. And your book is the only other place I saw someone talk about the same thing, which is like, instead of thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to be this one thing, is like you can figure out multiple things that you're good at, and then you can bring out your very own unique niche, and you'll be dominating that thing because it's so unique to you,
Yeah.
instead of just be following the footsteps and being like exactly like what everybody else does. It's like figuring out the exact things that you're good at, and they might not seem relevant at first. Like you talked about that girl that did like in MIT, I think, did mechanics and tennis at the same time. It's like two
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
completely irrelevant things,
yeah.
but
And then,
she made it work.
yeah, she became a robotics engineer, making a kind of robots that could play tennis.
Right.
Um, my example that I like is one of the most famous neuroscientists now, named V.S. Ramachandran, a really interesting man who I interviewed for Mastery. He's from India originally.
Mm.
And when he was a child, he was very weird. He was very different from other boys. He was odd. He liked collecting odd things. He liked going on the beach in India and finding shells of the most unusual, weirdest animals on the planet. He loved going to museums where they had all kinds of like ugly, grotesque, sort of, aborted fetuses of different animals and things.
Oh my
He was
God.
attracted to what was strange and odd. And then when
Yeah.
he he went to Cambridge, I believe, Oxford, I think Cambridge, and he studied psychology. And then he realized at some point in his career that what he was most interested in, obviously, were oddities. And so, how
Mm-hmm.
do I apply that to a career? Well, I'm already in psychology, which is something that interests me. I'm going to study the oddest form of brain disorders that can occur, right? Nobody else was doing that. People were researching how the brain works, what makes
Mm-hmm.
a good brain, etc. He was going to be the one that was going to study the weirdest kind of disorders that can happen, where suddenly you have a stroke or something and you don't recognize your own wife. You don't see her face anymore. Things like that, right? He turned it into the most fantastic career because he was the only one doing that at the time. He created this whole niche in neuroscience, and now it's a trend to study all of these things. People had studied it before, but they hadn't made it's his specialty. And so
Wow.
he found the one thing that was something that was a through line all the way to when he was 3 years old, when he was in his 40s, right? Because he'd always been attracted to that. So, that's kind of what you want. You want to be able
Yeah.
to find your own niche. You don't want to be doing something that 1,000 other people are doing because you have no power or no control. You want to find that one thing. And for me, it was writing the strange books that I write. For you, it's creating a podcast that no one exactly is doing the same thing. That's where power lies in this world.
Always being able to find empowerment in your own unique ways, but then also playing them right enough so that it attracts other people. Kind of like brings us back to what we were talking about in the beginning, like unique, but then not too like different or too weird, so people can like grasp what it is, and it can become your niche.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a little about seduction. What does seduction mean to you? And what do you think, or what's like your best law of seduction that you think has worked like a charm the most?
For me personally?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the idea is that seduction is a form of power, right? And basically what you're doing is you're getting people to kind of do what you want in the end, but they don't realize it because you are so clever and you're so indirect, and you give people a feeling of pleasure, right? That their defenses go down and they feel comfortable around you. They like you, they may even love you. And now you can kind of move them in a direction that you want. And people say, well, that's so ugly, that's so manipulative. But that is what seduction is. And it's not necessarily so ugly because it leads to, affairs, to romances, to perhaps marriage. It is kind of a pleasurable game. And the idea behind it is that in the world today, people do not have enough pleasure, right? It's probably the one thing that they're missing the most. They're so wired, they're so working so hard, they're so single-mindedly focused on their careers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that they're not having any pleasure. And then in our social world, everyone is so selfish and narcissistic that no one is really giving you attention that you like. Like if I were to try and seduce Pani, right, I would figure out what makes you different, what makes you unique, what you love in life that nobody else is giving you. Things from your childhood, things that make you excited, that you love, certain colors, certain flowers, certain gifts, certain places. And I would give that to you, right? I would get into your world instead of being obsessed with myself. I would get outside of myself into Pani's world, and I would say, this is what she is missing in her life, and I'm going to give it to her. The power of that is absolutely immense because nobody is giving that to you in general, right? It's so rare.
Make them feel seen. To be seen and to be heard is obviously an attractive thing. Yeah. So it's like figuring out in what ways they want to be heard, in what ways they want to be seen, and giving that to them.
Yeah. And so a simple example would be, we have a conversation at a restaurant at night, we're having dinner, and you say some things that you're not really paying attention to, and they're just sort of off the cuff, but they kind of reveal something that bothers you or something that you really are excited about. And then the next day, I bring up what you said in a different form, perhaps. I kind of quote you or something, or I give it a different spin. And I don't call a lot of attention to it, but to you that goes, wow, Robert was actually really listening to me. He heard what I said. He understood kind of what was behind my words. That's really interesting. Nobody ever does that, Okay, and as that happens, you start becoming a little less resistant. You start seeing Robert in a different way. You say, maybe this person can give me things that I don't get from other people. It doesn't matter if that other person isn't the handsomest person in the world, or isn't all buffed out, or et cetera. But they understand the psychology, right? They understand for a man what a woman is missing, or for a man what a man is missing for a woman. They understand this. That's what gives you the degree of seductive power in life. And that can make people fall in love with you. It can also mean in your office, You're not making people fall in love with you because that's kind of creepy, but you're making people like you. They feel charmed. You have a certain presence about you that makes that you're empathetic, that you kind of understand them, that makes people want to be around you. Or it can be
Right.
in politics. You know how to seduce people with your message. You can win elections. Or if you're marketing your product, you know what seduces the masses. People will buy your product. It gives you immense power. Because if in politics, if in the office, if within the sexual realm or in marketing, you're too direct, you're too forceful, people will go, that's ugly. I don't want anything of that. You're in my face. But if you're indirect, if you come from here instead of from here, they have no defenses. They go, wow, I'm going to buy your product. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to like you in the office. I'm going to have sex with you, or I'm going to fall in love with you. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's an incredible, powerful device that fewer and fewer and fewer people in this world understand, right? Fewer and fewer people in the world are actually good at the seduction game because for whatever reason, we're not used to it. You know, in the world of Tinder, etc., it becomes an app. It's not anymore your
Yeah.
psychology. It's more like boom, 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 right? But what's more important is understanding people's psychology, not an algorithm. That's like a
Yeah.
machine. That's like a computer. That's not human. Humans have emotions. Humans have psychology. Humans have weaknesses. So get out of that boom, boom, boom. Spend time around people and get inside their worlds. So when
Yeah.
you ask me my question about which one, there are a couple. I mean, enter their spirit, which is one of the strategies. Well, first of all, in seduction, I give the 9 types of seducer. And I
Yeah.
try and say that if you're too obvious in your seductive moves, if people know, oh, Pani read The Art of Seduction and she's using it on me, that's not going to be very effective, right? So you have to feel natural. You have to feel like it's not a game you're playing, but it's part of your personality. You're naturally like this. And I give you these types of seducers, right?
But
So,
wait, when I was reading Seduction, that's not how it felt. Like I was reading it trying to think like from the siren, I was thinking each one that I would read, I would think, oh, I can think of someone I know that is like that. And then when I found my own, I was like, oh, that's me. So it's not like when I was reading it, I wasn't like, oh, these are tactics that you can learn and
right.
implement. It was like, no, you're naturally one of these.
Yeah,
So like you
that's what I'm
just have
talking
to
about.
find which one you are, right?
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's what I mean. I mean that you have to find something that you're naturally good at that's part of your
Right.
character
Yeah,
and bring that out so people don't
exactly.
see you as being manipulative.
Right.
So
Yeah.
let's say you're naturally a coquette. A coquette is somebody, often a woman, but it can be a man who blows hot and cold,
Hot and cold. Yeah.
right? So one moment you're being very excited by that person. You're giving them looks that are very suggestive, right? You're listening to them very deeply. It's clear you really like them.
And then the
And
next
the
second
next
you're
day,
like, huh? Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly.
Sorry, were you talking?
It's extremely powerful, right? For men in particular. A coquette is like almost impossible to resist. It works on all of the elements of human psychology. But if it's so clear that that's what you're doing, then it doesn't work. It's like,
Yeah.
I could see her a mile away. She's playing that game. I don't want anything to do with her. But the
Yeah.
true coquette is naturally like that. They feel kind of ambivalent about people. They naturally feel kind of hot and cold, right? And so it's something that's inside of them. So they're not playing a game. It's naturally who they are. So when they turn cold, it doesn't feel like a game. It's actually how they feel, right? That's what makes it so powerful. So that's what I'm talking about there in that first part. And for that particular part of the book, I happen to have fallen under the rake category, although now I'm a reformed rake because I'm in a relationship. But
Which
so
one was
that
that one?
the rake is a man who's extremely obsessed and interested in women. He understands their psychology very deeply.
Puts in effort, puts in a lot of effort.
Yeah, but he's never satisfied with one woman. So he gives you a
Mm.
lot of attention, right? He fills your mind with, with all of his attentiveness. He's there. He understands your psychology. You're like, whoa, this is insane. It's very intense. You can't resist it. And then after a month, he's on to somebody else, right?
Sounds like a fuckboy.
Yeah. Okay, that's the way of putting it. That's the way of putting it. Yeah. That's kind of the slang expression, but I call it a rake, which sounds a little more noble than fuckboy.
Right.
I don't like to think of myself as a fuckboy or
As
as
a reformed fuckboy.
as a reformed fuckboy. Yeah, a former fuckboy. That sounds more mellifluous. I'm not a former fuckboy. I'm a reformed rake.
Good for you. So the woman you're dating right now has put an end, which is like every woman's dream. It's like when you start dating a fuckboy, you're like, I can change him. But
Well, that's
she
usually
actually did it.
yeah, it's usually a bad idea, because the moment you think that I can change this fuckboy means you're seduced, because you usually can't. Now, what happens with me is as you get older, as 30s turn into 40s, you get tired of the game, right?
Yeah.
It begins to seem mechanical, and you do want to settle down. So often a rake will want to settle down, and then you can reform them. But often they don't want to settle down, even when they're in their 50s.
You gotta wait for them to turn 40.
Or maybe not. I mean, maybe they're like Mick Jagger and they're never going to reform themselves.
Yeah.
So the moment you think you're the one to reform them, man, are you hooked, and you're in trouble. But I used one of the seductive strategies on her, which she knows. There's a tactic in there called create triangles, appear to be an object of desire, which is to me one of the most powerful of all the seductive strategies you can use. And essentially what it means is, if you pass by on the street of New York or Los Angeles, a restaurant that seems kind of interesting, but there's only one table that's people are sitting at, you go, maybe not, it doesn't seem that good. Then you pass by another restaurant that may not have as good food, but it's packed with people. 30 people are in there. They're laughing, having a great time. They're drinking. You go, well, let's go in there. It's the same thing in relationships. If you see a person that has no friends, who's never dated anyone before, who lives in some sloppy studio apartment and is kind of alone a lot, you're less likely to get involved in a relationship. But if you see that same person and they're in a party and all the women are talking to him and everyone is popular, he's got that kind of energy, go, yeah, I'm interested in him.
So don't be a loser.
Well, appear to be desired by other people is the lesson. And when I was we had one date and we weren't quite sure of each other. I decided to invite her. It was my birthday, to a party in a restaurant in which I knew 8 really beautiful women would be there. They were friends of mine, right? They would be there. She would see that Robert has these beautiful female friends who are all interested in him, maybe.
Oh, it so worked.
And it worked. It worked.
You're like, no, he's mine. I didn't even know I want him, but now I do.
Well, women can be very competitive, and you have to understand their competitive desires, and that's part of human desire. There's been very interesting books written about it, how human desire is what we call mimetic. We want to imitate. We're interested in what other people have. Yeah. So if we see that other people have these things, we want them as well. The viral effect. Well, that works in relationships as well.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And would the same thing work for women? I feel like for women, it would just I don't know, turn into a fight.
No, it would. It would. It'd have to be probably a little bit different. So you're at a party and, men
like a bunch of guys just come your way and
Yeah, it gives you an aura of desirability. We desire what other people have. Of course, it's a little bit double standard, because it could say, oh, she's a slut,
Right.
God, I don't want to have anything to do with that. So it can't be too sexual. And even my employee, if she saw that I was having affairs with all these women, that wouldn't have worked. It would be like, I can't trust him. It's more like, these are your friends. These are people who like you. And these are men who kind of are interested in you, but it doesn't seem like you've slept with all of them. then it could work, because men can be very, very competitive as well. Men like the hunt, they like the chase, right? And if they think that you're a valued trophy for them, that other men are after you, then they will go. But it's more kind of the classic female psychology of going after the married man, of going after the person who's already taken and being the one to take him away, kind of
I
thing.
never got that. I
Well,
never
okay.
understood that.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. It's the oldest trick in the book, just making someone jealous. A lot of times though, like what's really important is like knowing the limits to how far to take it and doing it gracefully. It's not so much to like make them jealous, it's just to make them see that you're desired.
Yeah. So it's not about necessarily making them jealous. It's
Right,
more about making them feel that you're desired by other people, stirring
right,
up people's competitive viral desires to have what other people have, right?
right. It's a delicate dance between pissing someone off
Yeah, yeah.
or just, making them more interested.
Well, the number one mistake people make in seduction, and often women are guilty of this, is they're too obvious, they're too easy, right? They're too easy to conquer. They're too easy, to seduce. So you want to play hard to get sometimes. You want to create distance. You want to not
Yeah,
return their phone calls right away. Maybe you wait an extra day. Maybe you wait a
yeah,
week. You don't text back right away. It makes it look like you have other things to do, that maybe there are other people
yeah,
in your life, that you're not desperate, right? So it makes it seem that you're worth more than you would be if you're just immediately writing them back every few minutes.
it's so true. And a lot of times people are like, well, I just don't want to play games. I just want to be this and be that. And it's like, you have to realize that if you want to call it games, call it games. If you want to call it manipulation. But it's like these are just basic human psychology. If you understand the rules, you can create that desire, and it can be like a long-lasting desire. It doesn't have to be, wouldn't you agree, right? Like is that playing games, or is that just
Well,
knowing what to do?
look, seduction is a kind of theater. It's a kind of drama, or if you prefer, it's a kind of a movie. So normally our lives are kind of drab and boring. We're working in our office, at our home. We're kind of dressed sort of sloppily, we kind of eat the same food. We have the same habits. When you're in a seduction or a courtship of some kind, it's like you're lifted out of your boring life into kind of a theater, to something that's heightened, that's
Mm-hmm.
intensified, that's extra, right?
Yeah,
So when you are going on your first date with someone that you like, you don't just dress the way you normally dress, right? You put on something nice, right?
hopefully.
Hopefully. And you maybe wear, perfume or makeup or whatever that is your game. Or if you're a man, you don't dress in your
Just
sloppy
shower.
shower, and you don't wear just a t-shirt on, you maybe put on a shirt, right?
Yeah.
So you can put some effort into it. Or you don't simply take them to the local Pizza Hut for the date. You take them to a restaurant with atmosphere. It's like a
Right.
theater, it's like a stage.
Right.
You're creating some fantasy. Is
Mm-hmm.
that ugly? Is that manipulative? Well, I get really angry with people who think that. We
Yeah.
all want drama in our life. We all want fantasy. We all want something more. And so the fact that someone is making an effort to please you, that they're actually trying to look nicer than they may normally look, they're taking you to places, that they're behaving in a way that's kind of responsive to you, is actually a good thing. It is manipulative in one way, but it's a good form of manipulation, where you're
Yeah.
showing the other person that you're willing to put some effort into this, that it's not just like, oh, I could just show up in my pajamas and it'll be okay. Or we can just come
Yeah.
over to my house and watch television. We want
Right.
something more. And a lot of women will complain that the man, after the first couple of dates, he isn't trying anymore. He takes me for granted. He's not doing anything that seems, like he used to do, right? So that sense of courtship, it's like a mating dance between two kind of birds or in nature, right? It's a game, it's a ritual. Don't look at it as manipulation. Look at it as something that goes back thousands of years. It's kind of the animal part of our nature. It's a courtship, and that it involves these kind of rituals of doing things that you normally don't do. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with that. There's no guilt, I think, attached to it. I
It's
think
paying attention. Yeah.
I think the opposite, where you make no effort and I'm just going to be who I am, man. I'm just going to talk the way I normally talk. I'm just going to be boring. I'm just going to watch TV. I'm just going to have you over. That's more off-putting than any kind of manipulation to me. Sorry.
No, this just like reminds me of this one incident that happened with this guy that I went on a few dates with, and he was like showing me this side of him that like I liked, but then it was definitely like he was showing a lot of it too early. Like I wasn't ready to see all that.
Like what?
Like fuck, I hope he's not listening to this. Like like he's very silly, right? And it's cute to be silly, but it's like, how silly are you? You know what I mean? Like on a first or second date, I'm not ready for you to be all that silly. You gotta ease me. You gotta ease me into your silliness, and then slowly I can accept you. But it's like if you just like dump a bunch of silliness on me, then I'm just gonna be like, you're a little too silly for me. You know what I mean? Like I love that, but anyways.
Well, what a lot of people think is being authentic is being
Exactly.
actually very selfish, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like, I'm just going to be who I am. I'm not going to put any effort into this. I'm not going to think of Pani and maybe she won't like what I'm doing. I'm not going to think about her psychology. I'm only going to do what pleases me, man. I'm just going to be myself. That's very selfish, That's the opposite of what's seductive.
But when I didn't feel bad that I didn't like, like the level of silliness he was showing, because like I like what I like. I don't have to apologize for it. But I felt bad when one time he was like, I feel like I can just be myself with you. And I was like, oh no.
Right.
It made me feel bad.
Yeah. Well, that didn't work out.
I know. So yeah, that just reminded me of that. Yeah, it's very true. It's like, don't be fake. Obviously, don't be fake, because that's also not attractive. And a lot of people can see through it when you have this super fabricated personality. Again, it comes to that delicate like dance of, yeah, present something that is going to be likable, but at the same time is authentic to you. Don't be too much of one side, because then the scale's going to tip too much,
Right.
I also really like what you were mentioning in the beginning when we talked about seduction, and you mentioned like listen to people, and this is something that you talk about in Laws of Human Nature. You talk about like being a good listener, learn how to listen deeply, right? And I think that's such a skill that I've been trying so hard to develop, and I would love to see more of it. A lot of times people don't really listen as you're speaking to them. You can tell, and I'm guilty of that as charged. Like we respond, or we prepare our response in our head, and we think of our judgments of what they're saying in our head, and not so much deeply listening. And what you're mentioning is, a lot of times when you listen to what they say, then the next day you can, reformat it in a different way and present it to them. Then they will be like, oh my God, this person was listening to me actually when I was talking yesterday. And that's also very attractive. And, a lot of times when we want people to like us, we try and we work so hard to be liked, to speak, to be understood. But you talk about this in your book, is like a lot of times when you want to be liked, instead of wanting to be understood, try to understand. Instead of wanting to be heard, try to listen, right? And people will walk away liking you a whole lot more than if you were to have this like magnificent performance of how amazing you are.
Right.
I just really like that.
Well, the thing is, It's not so much just a question of being a better listener, because that's very easy. Oh, I'm just going to listen better. But that doesn't really work, because we're so primed to be in our own heads that the moment you don't pay attention, you're back into your own little thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. The key to making what we're talking about work is what I say: you have to be genuinely interested in other people. So
Mm,
if I'm in a restaurant with Pani and I'm in a conversation, I have to go, she's more interesting than I am right now. I'm so used to hearing my own thoughts and my own things. It's kind of boring. I'm tired of it. But Pani comes from a different world. I don't know if you did, but maybe you grew up in Iran. You have all these experiences. You have these podcasts. You have this life here that's different. You probably have something weird about you, something unusual, something unique in your psychology. If you can start getting in that mind frame, then you want to get into her world. You want to understand what makes her tick. And the way I look at it is in the following: when you go to a movie, what excites you is about getting into other people, getting into their world. It's well written, it's well directed, and you're sucked into the drama, you're sucked into the characters, you're taken outside of yourself, and you want to go, my God, what are they going to do next? Think of people like that. Think of the person you're dating or having a conversation with. Instead of being in your phone, or instead of hearing your own thoughts, go, they're as interesting as any character in a movie. They have weird experiences. I want to learn from them. I want to understand that. And if you have that mentality, what it is it becomes a fun game. Because the more you pay attention to people, the more you listen to them and you figure out what makes Pani different, what her childhood was like. You start gaining bits of information. You begin to understand people's psychology on a different level. You're becoming better at being social. It becomes a skill that you now can apply without even thinking. You're so good at listening. You're so attentive to other people. You've learned so much that you're on a whole other level than all the other people who are so wrapped up in their phones. And it's going to give you power in your love life. It's going to give you power in work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's developing true social skills. So it's not that you just want to listen, but that you
yeah.
want to listen, that you're
Yeah.
excited by that other person, that you
Hmm.
want to get into their world and into their spirit.
So it's like genuinely be interested in other people, and then they will be interested in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But don't even think then they will be interested in me. You don't even want that. You don't even care if they're interested in you. You are, but
If you're
you,
dating them, though, it's not just like a social gathering. If you're dating someone,
yeah.
preferably if they like you.
Yeah,
Very
well, they
helpful.
will end up liking you by this attention that
Right.
you pay. But of course, yes, that is what you want. But in your social encounters that are not dating, it's
Yeah.
just this is I'm like learning from this. I'm learning about what their lives are like. So if I talk to you and I glean that this kind of thing happened to you in your childhood that was very traumatic and hurt you deeply and causes you pain, I've learned something about people. I've learned something about, so I can understand other people who've gone through something similar. You're deepening your knowledge. It's as if you're reading more and more books about human psychology. And you can't do that with a book. You can't do that with a smartphone. You can't do that on a computer. You have to do that in talking to people, in interacting with them, with having eye contact, with having them in the flesh before you. And I tell you, Bonnie, it's a real problem in the world today where people are not spending enough time. Even if they're together, they're not interacting, they're not looking at each other, they're not engaging in a human way. They're still kind
Yeah.
of looking at their phones or whatever.
So another thing you talk about that I'm very into, and you kind of, you obviously do it in a very concise way and mastery. You bring up social intelligence, and I've read social intelligence books, and the one chapter that you talk about social intelligence easily talks about it in every detail that it's necessary and wraps it up real quick in one chapter, right? Social intelligence. Yeah, and it's amazing how you bring up the example of Benjamin Franklin, out of all people. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. Like, what exactly is social intelligence? I think when people think of intelligence, they think IQ. They think you're born with a certain IQ. That means how intelligent you are, and there's nothing you can do about that. And so then this idea of social and emotional intelligence, I feel like there are newer concepts that we're just getting to. I mean, they existed, but they haven't been studied the way they are now and talked about. So I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit and why you chose Benjamin Franklin.
Well, the idea behind it is mastery is I'm going to teach you how to become a master in your profession, whether it's chess or music or podcasting or science or entrepreneurship, right? And usually when we think of that, we think of technical skill. I've learned how to play the piano. I've practiced so much that I get really good at it. I went to Harvard and I got an MBA. I understand business. I'm going to be really good at building my new business, etc. But what happens with a lot of people is you forget the fact that we're social animals, that it's not just about technical skill. I do a lot of consulting with people, high-level people in business, in sports, in entertainment. And the number one problem they have is they're technically good at their job, but they don't understand people. They are crap in dealing with human psychology, and it makes all kinds of problems and it makes them miserable. Then they come to me. So if you want to be good at what you do, you have to consider being good with people as one of the skills that's absolutely essential. Because no matter what field you're in, if you are inept in dealing with your employees, with your boss, etc., you're not going to get very far. So first of all, think of it as a skill that's absolutely critical for you to acquire. And what I liked about the Benjamin Franklin story was we often think that people who are good at this are kind of naturally born that way. It's like a gift they have, like a Bill Clinton or someone. They're naturally gregarious and they're good with people. And what I liked about Benjamin Franklin was he ended up being perhaps one of the most socially intelligent people who ever lived. He could figure out people on a level that was absolutely, he was like the Albert Einstein of social intelligence. But he started off, when he was a young man, he was the worst person at it, right? He was terrible. He didn't listen to people. He was so full of himself. He was always putting people off. He was inadvertently insulting them. He was getting even his own brother angry at him, wanted to kill him. And at some point he realized, I'm an ambitious person. I want to have an important career. I want to maybe get into politics, etc. Something is wrong. It's not working. And what's not working is that I'm really, really bad with people. I've got to change this. I've got to change my mentality. And he essentially trained himself to become much better at like learning a skill, like being great at basketball. It was just a matter of training himself to always get outside of himself, get inside other people, get inside their psychology, understanding what makes them tick, what their weaknesses are, what their vulnerabilities are, how I can play with them, etc. And he
But he also
transformed
had
them.
that self-awareness
Yeah.
to know that the fact that he sucks at dealing with people, because a lot of times people just blame it on everybody else. It's always their fault. It's their
Yep.
problem. And I'm perfect and I'm not doing anything wrong. So it took that self-awareness as a step one to know that, no, I'm the problem. I don't know how to deal with people.
Well, what's behind that self-awareness? Because I like to always dig deeper and deeper. So it's very true that he was self-aware, but why was he self-aware? He was self-aware because he wanted power, because he was ambitious and he realized it wasn't working. So if he wanted to figure out why it wasn't working. So if he just went on blaming other people, he understood that that wasn't going to change anything. He had to see that the problem was inside of himself. He saw that because he truly understood that he was getting in his own way and it wasn't other people, right?
Yeah.
So he was able to get outside of himself because he was so ambitious and he wanted power. A lot of people don't really want power. They think they do. But what they really want is they want to have their ego satisfied. They want to feel good about themselves. So if I blame the other person for my social ineptness, that makes me feel kind of good because I don't have to look at myself. But then it doesn't lead to any kind of power. So he understood that he had to look at himself to change who he was. And it's painful and it's not good, but it was the only way to realize his ambitions in life. He didn't want to just satisfy his ego and feel good about himself. He wanted
Yeah,
to change himself.
that's a really
So
good point.
look at yourself in the mirror. And I tell people, inevitably, you have made mistakes in dealing with people. Me, Robert Greene, who's written all these books on the subject, I see them right there. I've made many mistakes. I still continue to make mistakes. So I can bet that you out there have made hundreds of mistakes in your life.
Yeah,
So the first thing I tell people is try and stop blaming other people. And in every situation, even in dealing with the worst person on the planet, there is something that you did that actually made it worse or that actually you're responsible for. So, for instance, let's
yeah,
say you get involved with a really narcissistic person, and there are a lot of them out there, believe me, and they become very abusive and they make you feel miserable. They get you involved in all of these dramas, and you ended up you can't get away from them, but you hate them, etc. Well, naturally, you're going to blame them for everything that's gone wrong in your life. Okay, but why did you get involved with them in the first place? What is it about you that is attracted to narcissistic people? What is it about you that made you so unaware that you didn't see signs that you were getting involved with a deep narcissist? You can control that. You're not helpless. You can always recognize people like that, right? And you can get away from them before you get involved. So stop always externalizing, saying they're wrong, this is what they hurt me, et cetera, and look at what you did and what you can control. So next time you can change that. That's an
yeah,
incredibly important part of social intelligence. What you brought up as self-awareness, right? You will not
hmm,
have any social intelligence unless you can look at yourself and critique yourself. So I say go through a process, evaluate your failures in life, evaluate the things that didn't go well, and look at what you might have done to contribute to that. And that will start building some of these skills that I'm talking about, right? So, for instance, law number 1 in the 48 laws of power is never outshine the master, right? You have a boss, somebody above you, and you try so hard to please them and to seem like you're the best at what you do that you make them feel insecure, that you make them feel like you're after their job, that you're better than they are, and then you get fired. And they don't tell you why, and it's terrible. That happened to me on several occasions. That's why I wrote that chapter 1. And then I go through a process. Was it my fault? You know, normally I would like to blame them for firing me just because I was working so hard, just because they were insecure. But yes, I was to blame. I was like, I wasn't aware of their ego, right? I wasn't
yeah,
aware that I maybe have to play down some of my qualities and make myself fit in and not be so ambitious in the first few months and not so aggressive. I have to fit in more. I have to make them feel comfortable. I didn't do that. Now, when I have that awareness, I can control it and it won't happen the next time. So, social intelligence is absolutely critical. I mean, there are people who get ahead in life who are not
yeah,
actually very technically good, but
yeah,
are good at social intelligence. And that is their main skill in life. And it's basically the ability, like we were talking about in Seduction, to find people fascinating, to listen to them, and to learn in every encounter. So when you're learning computer skills or business skills, you're trying to improve yourself, you're trying to learn through books. If you're developing your social intelligence, every encounter, every podcast, every dinner, every lunch, every conversation is a way to improve your skill to learn about other
yeah,
people, right? So that's kind of the key to it. And it will open up all of these doors to you, right? It will make life so much easier. You won't understand how liberating it can be to go through your days to day life without all of this needless emotional drama, right? So let me give you one more example and then I'll finish here. Let's say you're needing to hire someone to work for you, right? You need to hire a business partner or an employee, okay? The person who doesn't have any social intelligence we'll look at that resume and we'll look at that charming smile and that beautiful face, if they have a beautiful face, and all of their lovely words, etc., and go, I'm going to hire that person. Yeah, they seem really nice. They seem to like me. Yeah, I'm going to hire them. And then, whoa and behold, 3 months later, you find out that charming person is actually extremely manipulative, extremely selfish, extremely lazy. You didn't take the time to actually look behind the pleasant smile and the mask they're wearing. A socially intelligent person does not pay attention to that. They understand that there are things hidden behind the mask that are more important, like the person's character. Character is more important than personality. Character means this is who someone is deep down inside. So when things become very stressful, they don't panic and lose their minds. They're able to work with other people. They're not only after themselves, etc. They can take criticism, which is extremely important. Okay,
Yeah.
so the socially intelligent person hires someone with the right, who fits well. The other person doesn't. The person who doesn't has all of this drama, this horrible bullshit they have to go through for months. They have to fire him. Months later, they're continually thinking about all the drama and they're so angry and bitter. The socially intelligent person is swimming through life. No problems. I hired the right person. No drama, no emotional trauma. Everything's kind of going easily. You have no idea if you can navigate through life like that, how much easier everything will be for you. So that's the importance to me of social intelligence.
Yeah, very, very important. And as you mentioned, like there are people who are good technically at what they do, but they don't have the social intelligence. They're not good with people. So they're never really going to reach the highest peaks of the mountain of their career. But on the other hand, though, there are people who are not that technically good at what they do, but because they're so good with people, they're going to get up there
Yeah.
much easier and much faster.
And one other thing in mastery, I interviewed a man named Paul Graham, who's an incredibly successful entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. And he recognized early on that he's not good with people. And he understood that that was a limitation. And a lot of people in Silicon Valley, some of them might even be on the spectrum, they have a limitation in dealing with people. But what made him brilliant, Paul Graham, was he knows he's not good at it. So he married a woman who was brilliant at it, and he made her his partner in business.
I love that.
And she is his social intelligence. She is able to hire the right people. She is able to do the things that he can't do. He recognized his own limitations. So that's also a strategy you can employ.
When they say you complete me, that's true. That's great. That's great that he found out what he's lacking and he found it in a partner.
Yeah.
And somehow it fits so perfectly. I also want to ask you, so many people, I think this is probably the biggest criticism of your work, that you teach manipulation. I'm sure you've heard this a million times. And even sometimes I like post like these videos of my favorite laws on TikTok, and like so many people love it, but there's always like those people that are like, wait, so you're telling us how to manipulate? And like I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna have Robert Greene answer this. So how do you answer that?
Well, it depends on the specific law, on the specific instance. But the 48 laws of power, you have to, you can't just read a book literally. You have to think, right? And so the book is written in a way where I'm not necessarily telling you what to do in life. The people who are really sharks, who are really, really manipulative, they don't need the 48 laws of power. They're already brilliant at the game. They know how to do these things. They know how to crush your enemy totally. But you sitting there watching Pani's videos on TikTok, you're probably not so good at it. I wasn't very good at it. You're naive. You need knowledge. You need to understand what the power game is like. Stop being so upset and so full of rage and ready to accuse Robert Greene, but look at yourself and say, I need awareness. Okay, I never want to crush my enemy totally. That's not who I am. All right, fine. But be aware that in business, that happens all of the time. So stop being so naive. Get other people to do the work, but always take the credit. That's not me. I don't want to do that. That's ugly, Robert. That's manipulative. Yes, you're right. But if you work in Hollywood, if you work in journalism, that's law number one. People are going to get you to do all of the work for them, and they're going to take the credit for you, and you're going to feel resentful and bitter. And you don't need to feel resentful and bitter. You need to understand how to deal with it. That's what that law is about, right? Conceal your intentions. I don't want to be someone who conceals my intentions. That's obvious. That's inauthentic. Everybody's playing that. So many people are playing that game in life. If you're not aware that people are not necessarily who they pretend to be, then man, you're going to have a lot of pain in this world, right? I'm trying to show you that people are continually concealing their intentions. So don't be such a literal-minded slob and only read the words of the book, but think about how you want to educate yourself about other people in this world, right? Okay, so it's not just about you becoming manipulative. It's about you not being so stupid and so naive that you fall for a lot of these tactics. Now, not all of the laws are manipulative. So the people who like to say, oh, Robert only teaches manipulation, they choose the 12 most manipulative laws in the book, which I'm afraid to say is a form of manipulation in and of itself, because 2/3 of the book has nothing to do with manipulation. Be a perfect courtier, work on the hearts and minds of others, despise the free lunch, which is all about being generous with your money, create compelling spectacles, on and on and on. There are many laws that have nothing to do with kind of manipulation, but they don't point to that. They choose the really nasty ones so that they can get on their high horse and feel superior to everyone else and say, look, I'm not like that. I don't play these kind of games. I'm much better than that. I'm a social justice warrior. I'm so much superior to that.
Okay.
Well, if you're going to read the book, if you truly are interested in it, read all 48 laws and then say, yes, some of them are manipulative, but some of them aren't. That's fair. But to only choose crush your enemy totally, act like a friend, but play like a spy, that's a form of manipulation. You are picking and choosing the worst parts of the book in order to make yourself look better. So that's how I would answer them.
No, there were definitely.
And one last thing. The people I've discovered, and I've had 20 some years since that book came out, the people who I've dealt with who are the angriest about the book, who are like what you say, are often the most passive aggressive, manipulative people in the world, because they don't want to admit it. They have a dark side and they're concealing it. And they're actually secretly extremely interested in power, and they're very passive aggressive. But that's a little secret here.
No, that's so true. And there were definitely some of the laws I read, and I felt bad that I understood them so much. Like there was this one that was leave the unhappy and unfortunate.
That's not what that gets me so angry. I'm not angry at you, but people don't understand that law. It's not about ignoring people who are unfortunate. It's about
I posted about it. It got like almost 1 million views and so many angry comments.
It's about people who are drama queens.
Yeah.
Who create their own drama, who create their own problems in life, and they infect you with it, and they pretend that it's always other people that are causing it. But people who are genuinely victims, who are genuinely unfortunate in life, that's not what I'm talking about. People who say that haven't read the goddamn law itself, which I make it very explicit that those who have suffered genuinely in life deserve our empathy, deserve our help. But there are other people who aren't victims, who create their own misery. If you have never met somebody like that, your eyes are closed. You have no social intelligence. You have no awareness, because they're all around you. There are drama queens, drama kings, if we want to say men as well, who are creating all of this stuff around them, and then they're blaming other people, and you get involved with them, and they infect you with their unhappiness, with their discontent. That's what that law is about. So to say otherwise is to be manipulative.
Yeah, and out of all there were many angry comments, but there were so many people who also said, yeah, I was in a relationship with someone like that and I sank to the
Oh,
bottom
good.
and now I finally got out. There were so many people that said, this is what I needed to hear. I'm literally with someone
Okay.
right now who's dragging me to the bottom and I need to
Okay.
free myself.
All right.
You
Good.
know?
All
So
right.
many. Yeah,
I feel better. Okay. Thank you. I have to check out your TikTok account. Okay. I'm sorry.
no, please don't. All right. Well, thank you so much. I kept you for so long, but I still
Yeah.
have more questions, but I feel like you're tired.
Yeah.
Let's just do,
I gotta do some work now. I gotta
yeah,
call
we
my
can.
mom and do some work.
It's okay. We can go call our moms and then we can have another episode hopefully down the line.
Yeah.
Hopefully in person so I can meet you. And you guys definitely buy, I mean, if you don't have any of his books, like what are you doing with your life? So please tell us where people can find you, maybe Instagram or anywhere else that you want to put out there.
Yeah. Well, I have one website that kind of aggregates them all. It's robertgreeneofficial.com or at robertgreeneofficial.com. And there you'll find Instagram, Facebook. I have a TikTok account,
Oh.
YouTube, Twitter, and everything will be there, as well as links to my various books and my blogs that I used to write and all of my prior podcasts, and also an email address to write me and tell me how much you hate my books or whatever. But understand that if you do write me, particularly for advice, I'm extremely busy. So please don't take it personally if I don't answer you. But that's all. But I do love getting your comments.
And all of your stuff is Robert Greene Official.
At robertgreeneofficial.com.
Amazing, amazing. I'm so happy we got to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too,
And
Pani.
I hope everybody enjoyed. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome.
All right.
We'll do it
Bye,
again soon.
everyone.
Bye,
Yes.
everyone. Yeah.
Bye. Goodbye.